the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests bring you leading-edge astrology conversations through a journey of soul growth patterns connecting astrology's energetic cycles. Get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello, Sue Rose Minahan, Talk Cosmos, and today is a very special day. It is a summer solstice, June 20th. Every year the sun returns 6 months one way, and now it's at the most northern point, 0 degrees Cancer on this day, globally. It has to do with the directions, and it's a great return. And then it'll go with the winter solstice at 0 degrees Capricorn. So there's various themes we could call for this energy. And we're also, of course, with the Moonbeam Team, which will be very soon joining me, thankfully, is that we have the full moon and the new moon. And the full moon's always the opposite sign, which will be Capricorn. And we can look at this as parental roles, really. The new moon in its own of Cancer, which will be in July. And we get a retake every year to kind of recenter about our parental experiences, whether we are one or whether, obviously, we all had some parental roles in our lives, whether they were direct or indirect. Not all of us had perfect lives, but yet we had in some form this adaptation to what we were ruled by. What is the authority? What nurtures us? And so essentially it comes back to what is home. What feels like home for us. And the home in its element is really changing around the globe. So with that said, we are now ready for the Moonbeam Team. I think we are ready for the Moonbeam Team.
Relating to the sun and moon's energies, including the planets and the entire cosmos for the month's systematic 2-week intervals of the new moon and full moon, plus the annual 4 to 5 eclipses, this is your Moonbeam Team.
I'm Sue Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos, an evolutionary astrologer and consultant, plus a certified color energy coach. I explore creative expression as an artist, a musician, and write abundantly, stories to poetry. I love investigating mythology's language, philosophizing eternity, and I'm a perpetual student of life, seeing oneness of body, spirit of people, animals, and nature.
I'm Elizabeth Liz Machette, certified astrologer, sacred healing counselor, tarotist, and numerologist, providing individual consultations, teaching and tutoring internationally, co-author of Gateways to Change, Keys to Navigating the Seas of Life, currently facilitating workshops in Camino Island, Washington.
I'm Catherine Metcalf, professional astrologer, intuitive, and tarot card reader. I am very blessed to live my passion by offering individual consultations and teaching classes at a local college and online. I love to talk and write about the planetary dances and how we fit into it. I have been lucky enough to be featured on NBC, Cosmopolitan Magazine, and Huffington Post. My goal is to educate, enlighten, and empower you.
And I'm Sarah Stromley, a craniosacral therapist and founder of Brain Body Therapy in Kirkland, Washington. I'm an evolutionary astrologer that incorporates different forms of horary, location mapping, and medical astrology into my practice. I enjoy uncovering flower and mineral frequencies that also support the mind-body coherence that aid in the healing journey.
And as Albert Einstein said,
energy is never destroyed. Energy only changes.
And you know, when I hear that, I'm so glad to hear it, because about energy always just rebooting itself. You know, it is that consistency between the cardinal of action to the fixed of like homeostasis or stasis, whatever it is, and then mutability. And we seem to be in a huge world of mutability these days, which I'm learning. Of course, the nodes are there. And as I had just said to my crew here, that are joining me, that I trust that we'll learn the best of the mutable, meaning we go through the shadow of each of these archetypal energies to get to its real efficient usage, because it's great to have a lot of options, but holy criminy, it's a lot. So as I speak, we're talking about the solstice first, and it was June today. And here in Kailua Kona, it is going to be in the evening at 5:32, meaning that it'll be about midnight back east and about 8:30 there on the West Coast. And interestingly, if we look at that from the standpoint, today Jupiter went
Stationary.
retrograde. Well,
Yeah.
stationary. It's going to go, yes, tomorrow, retrograde as of, I think it's, I kept trying to figure out, some say the 20th, but I think it'll be tomorrow. Sarah, is that what you're saying? Because it went stationary. Anyway, okay, if you didn't, because I was checking and now with all these things. But anyway, it is retrograde within hours or half a day or something like that in Pisces, which is so significant. It really is this theme also in Pisces, but where the compassion, from what I've understood, goes inward. So, okay. And pardon me, I didn't mean to draw attention to that. It was just that I thought when you said today, it was stationary that you had. Anyway, so let's see. I am trying to share that chart.
I think what you just said, though, about the Jupiter going retrograde and having compassion for ourselves, because
Yes.
it's going inwards, right? It's
Yes.
all related to this grand water trine that we have with the moon in Scorpio, the sun in Cancer, and Jupiter in Pisces.
Perfect. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Because
So- I just checked. It's retrograde officially on next Thursday, the 1st of July. So,
Oh,
well,
but it's stationary. So
no, well, yes, but I think, oh boy, I'm sorry. I brought in a kettle of worms here or something because I did check, and I think it's because so many I've been listening to some other astrologers. It will be then, but I think it's stationary now, and it's,
yeah.
well, anyway, but it is also, I believe, well, let's find this out. This is always what people do, don't they? They kind of, that's why we're astrologers. We sit here and we debate and we try to figure things out. But according to the ephemeris of the one that I've got my little book on, I bet you, well, whatever. Doesn't want to tell me. Gosh, okay. Well,
In my ephemeris, it says 6:20 at 11:06 a.m.
yeah, it
Pacific
does say
Daylight Time.
Okay. Yeah, I just
right,
didn't know
it
if
is today. Mhm.
Okay.
All right, well, we're settled. Well, that's what retrograde is we or is we not?
Yeah. It just stays at 2 degrees until Saturday the 1st. So,
Oh, yeah, exactly. It is a long time, and that's a good point,
it's
too.
a slow moving planet. So,
Yeah, and just like the sun, getting back to the solstice, that's a good feedback exactly into this factor, is that sol means sun and stis means stop. So the sun, when it's we've achieved our northern point, and we sit here ready to start taking all that empowerment going towards the next solstice. So yes, we have Jupiter nearly retrograde in stationary, meaning it's a real strong point in that water grand trine between Pisces of our spirit and the moon in that deep investigative Scorpio. So we're really repondering what it is to be in those waters of Cancer. It's a moment to reflect really of what home is, of Cancer, of what home is. And I had a thought here. Did somebody have something they wanted to say, though, before I go into this idea about home?
Yes, on this solstice, the sun moon phase is first quarter and a trine. So it's adjustments, but it's with cooperation since it's in a trine also.
Well, that's heartening. That means we have some support, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Because, I know too, because the moon is our stories. And here, I'll stop sharing this for a moment so we can see everybody. But with, emotions and Cancer, it's everything about our stories, our personal stories, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and lots of
Yeah.
emotion. We're all going to be feeling intense emotions, I think. Our emotions are going to be on the surface. So, yeah. But
And
it does come back to we've got to find what nurtures us, right? With the sun in Cancer. And we need to do more of that.
Yes. And those areas, I was thinking when we were children, if they weren't recognized, it's so important for us to nurture it ourselves. Sarah, go ahead. I can hear you in the background.
The sun, the sun is trine Jupiter, which I thought that's, probably why we were making Jupiter so significant a little bit ago.
Yes.
And so, and Jupiter, when it's in that stationary phase, it's so, its intensity is boosted. And so it just helps us to feel that trine aspect and the fact that it's more amplified, the fact that it's also in its rulership of Pisces. It just really helps us to feel bigger and more vital than we normally feel. So, and that sets the theme for this season as well. So, indeed. Those are both expansive, no boundaries with Pisces and expanding Jupiter. And so that emotional waters we're in. And in fact, science just declared we had a fifth ocean. I mean, we have the North and South Atlantic, we have the Pacific, we have the Indian, and now we have the Antarctica. It's like, when we look at the water element in life, this emotional element and its different significations, it's amazing. And thinking of what are we aligned with, in that chart, there's a lot more, but it's if we're how we align our stories to how we perceive that story, how we reflect, because with all these retrograde planets right now, it's rethinking whether it's Mercury, Jupiter, right on the cusp, Neptune, Pluto, and Saturn. Yeah. Uranus is the only one that's holding out, which it does, which is saying, hey, you guys, let's get on board, be the true self. It's like we have a chance to reflect on the stories that we held dear. We always have this every year at this time to go, hey, I'm going to reshift them and re-see it in a light with all my new experiences. And therefore it can propel a whole new angle into our direction, into our new life that we want to create,
And half the planets are in water signs of sun out to Pluto of the 10. So half are in water. And Jupiter is that vibration's big and the moon's in Scorpio. So, really getting in touch with our deep feelings and emotions and creating a new story. A friend was called back to work and her 3 associates, and the 3 quit, and she's going back to work because they called them to come back in the office, and the other 3 decided they don't want to work in an office anymore. So it's making a new story for ourselves.
I just saw that on the news today too, how there's thousands of people who are not wanting to go back to work. So I think this time that we've had with COVID has really allowed everybody to take time and think about what is truly important to them. Yeah. So people that got to work from home are like, I like working in my PJs.
Yeah, it's that tension square that we're having all year between the new and the old. I mean, thinking of Saturn and Uranus is with Ceres. I mean, Saturn of structure, Uranus of the new, let's break the system, let's get to the authentic real deal. And it's with that nurture, the grief person. And I'm saying this so quickly, just as a recap to focus us and our audience, of Ceres. And so, yes, it's been rebooting it. And these Greek mythologies, there's an online, The Conversation it's called, and it brought up the fact that of Homer, who writes the Iliad and the Odyssey, the great mythological story epics that so much is derived from. And it is about home. That in really great takeaways, that home is a place where we feel our identity is from our beginning. That, let's say, in times of trauma and war, it separates us and changes our perspective of who we are and what we've done in our experiences of existentialism, you could say. When you go to war, obviously it's not just to pat people on the back, or any other terrible experience where your whole dignity has been revoked, you might say, which many people are reliving historical repurposing the truth of like Juneteenth yesterday.
Yeah.
It's a great celebration of true emancipation that will change all of us, thankfully, into a greater awareness of ourself and each other, regardless of where we're at in the spectrum of humanity. So there's that, and there's also the war, all the wars. We've had certainly a great many. There's still people from World War II, Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan, goes on and on, Desert Storm, etc. So, stopping that, realizing who am I? And this idea that, because it's getting back to the home, the idea of our identity, that if we can retell the stories of what we were, and have them validated, we regain that sense of self. But in doing self, also, it kind of reflects into that, incorporates that new part of us, which isn't always so simple to do on a personal level. Maybe on a collective basis, we're working on that. But also, there's a lot of grief, loss in everything. I'm just looking at the archetype of Ceres that's correct me, please. That's conjunct at the same degree, 12 degrees of Uranus in that tension square of the nurturing that we're talking about, and the higher octave of the moon. In fact, Sarah and I are going to be taking a class with, I'm calling you out, Sarah, sorry, with Alan Clay. He does dwarf planets. And we were thinking, oh boy, we're going to get a new take on this archetype because it gets into in depth. How did it work in our life? But she is I appreciate how Alan says that Ceres is a higher octave of because a mother Ceres was, and also of loss and nurturing. The sun goes through its phases. So let's see.
And also, and something I heard from one of the conferences, or maybe from one of you, I can't remember the source, but they were saying that Ceres describes the relationship with the mother. So it's
perfect.
So we can cover that more in more charts that we're looking at.
Yes, exactly.
That theme is going to be playing out.
Yes, it is. Oh, I see. And so yes, thank you for that, Sarah, because now it reminds me, I was talking about the father. So, but in the fact is in the Iliad, which was, because today is Father's Day, at least here in the United States, and I had been thinking of the mother-daughter. So here is the father. Okay, well, the father was Odyssey and the Iliad, these ancient epics, was saying that after the war, that the king of Troy got Achilles, who killed his son, to grieve with him because he says, what good is it to grieve alone? In other words, he didn't have that relationship there. So it gave me that dynamic. It's that dynamic where of, I don't know, is it community? There is something that in sharing our story, whatever it is, that we can find solace maybe in remembering, or else by, as he returned to his own father, going through the stories that re-identified himself with who he was, with his own dad. So there's these two sides of this whole element of the story. So the big picture, as I will send off, is this retracing of our parental roles.
Did you guys want to touch on that Venus at 22 degrees Cancer
please.
too?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I think, Liz, you mentioned that degree was really significant.
Yes,
You wanna
because
say
when
more?
we had in January of 2020, we had Pluto and Saturn conjunct at 22 degrees of Capricorn. So that's opposition. So that Venus is kind of ringing that bell of that conjunction. And that conjunction happens approximately every 33 to 38 years. And the last time was 38 years ago in Libra.
And it tremendously important. And I'm so glad you brought that up. And it is also a world point. You know, world points are ones that affect, there's 0 degrees cardinal, for instance, that the solstice is at. And 22 cardinal is also a world point. It affects the globe. And of course, the cardinals are so.
I remember Anne Ortley saying that the 22 degrees, I think it was Capricorn, or was that the COVID?
Cardinal.
Yeah. Was that the COVID discovery point?
It may have been, because it was
Yeah, 'cause I
back
think
in
she was saying
January
something
also.
Yeah, so I think all those planets were clustered, kind of like what Liz was saying, and that's kind of when the origination point was. So maybe this has to do with finding ways to change our relationship with it.
Excellent.
Well,
It
I know
is
we talked
changing
too
us.
about Venus. You know, Venus represents our values and finances and food, right? And
Yes.
when we talked the other day, you know, somebody had stated, you know, look at all the restaurants that are opening now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that there's new currencies coming out with the cryptocurrency and all that stuff. So
Yeah, Venus's resources, because reminding our folks here, our audience rules both Taurus of resources and finances, personal self-reliance, survival, and then the Libra of partnerships
And
and
it's
balance.
interesting that we have 2 world points in this summer solstice chart in Cancer.
Absolutely. Let's pull up the bi-wheel. Okay, go ahead, Sarah. Keep talking while
I wanted to, also point out on this chart that Venus is trine Neptune while simultaneously being opposed to Pluto. Now, this combination has been happening every year because Pluto and Neptune are moving so slow. And so there could be ways that we are seeking to, new ways that we may be seeking to nurture ourselves that could kind of have some weird weird element of like, wow, that was not at all what I expected. So so the last time it happened was August 26th of 2020, and it perfects actually tomorrow. So it's been kind of going on, but last year around August 26th, and then July 17th, 2019. So if you remember, if there was any new situations, any new friendships, any new things that you were attempting, contractual type things, may not have been at all what you expected. So yeah, I had a big business deal that just went completely sideways based on a person that I was really glamored with, because there's like this, like, wow, this is perfect, this is beneficial, this is exactly what I need. And then like this other element, like, showed itself.
Well, I will say that because we don't have much time, Sarah, we're really getting down to the half hour here. So I thank you. I will say too, that for myself, I moved then. I went on a big trip getting all my moving and whatnot. Let's look at this bi-wheel. Can you see this? Let's do for 1 minute. Can you see the bi-wheel? Yes or no? Please tell me. Okay, thank you. We need, bam. All right. So this was half a year ago, and this is now in the inside. And for those folks that can't see, that was December 21st, 2020 at 8:21 in Kaluakona. I'm sorry, I didn't change my charts. I'm here in the Big Island. Okay, so in other words, it's interesting to see also from this standpoint some of the effects of what it would be. And I think I'm trying to remember what we did think of this. If nothing else, of course.
Well, we talked about how Trump was still president. COVID, there was not a vaccine for it yet, right? In the winter 2020.
Actually, they did have it, but they hadn't worked out how to distribute it yet.
We didn't know about it. I think that was the thing. The fact is that to draw those 2 points together, the difference is significant that we didn't, just to tie it together, that it may have been there, but nobody knew it was happening. And it was a lot of uncertainty running around. So that was for sure. And I'm trying to remember where here, it's a little bit of a shaggy. I'm seeing Mars and I'm seeing, well, you know what it is? Mostly if we look at Gemini, like right now, we know Gemini is so close to the North Node. We have our direction pretty well figured out. Whereas last time, Jupiter was at that very early stage of the conjunction, right? It was just renewing the whole new scenario. Well,
it was exact. I mean, look at it to the minute. That's incredible.
It was going to be the next day, actually, the 21st, but so correct. Yes. Okay. Well, I can hear the music in the background and people can look at that chart more for themselves. But this is the Moonbeam Team for Cancer with Liz Machette and Catherine Metcalf and Sarah Stromley and myself, Sue Rose Minahan. We'll be right back June 20th, the solstice.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. Currently, we are in the period of Cancer. By leaving a cycle based on connecting mental communication to the external, the energy of Cancer involves emotions, which create our personal story through our emotional associations and attachments. As a cardinal water sign that is nurturing, Cancer needs to process emotions in one's own internal rhythm of cycles in order to complete an evolution.
Talk Cosmos brings you leading-edge astrological conversations with hour-long programs each week on KKNW. The show goes live every Sunday from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on Facebook and YouTube, along with daily chats throughout the week on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel. While you're there, make sure you click like and subscribe buttons so you can get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or, if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. So, grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
Welcome, stargazers. This is Katie Cadge, evolutionary astrologer at Kara Evolutionary Astrology. and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we understand how to implement our free will through the cosmos.
Alternative Talk, 1150 on AM, 98.9 HD3 on HD, 1150kknw.com on the web.
Hi, Sue Rose Minahan again, and this is Talk Cosmos with the Moonbeam Team for Cancer. We've just spoken a lot about the not solar eclipse. There's so many tremendous energetic events. This is the solstice, when the sun stands still at 0 degrees, the most northern point on the globe, and then we'll retrace back to and the importance is, our axis is at 23 degrees and a half. In fact, the axis, I guess, just changed. We have a new ocean as a result, which I have not investigated, but it's really talk about emotional times for Cancer. That's very significant. But it goes 23 degrees and then it flips across and it goes 23 other degrees. So it's winter down below, it's summer up here above the equator. And so we were talking about the solstice, about changing our stories, looking at our stories, realigning who we would be, or grieving too for what has been, in order that, because there is like a recognition of a commonality. There is Homer put in his stories some significance of joining together, the validity that, yes, we saw it that way. This was lost. This is gone. This is true. Now what do we do? How are we going to go on forward? And there's some simpatico that way. And on the other hand, if one's lost part of themselves, if one can retrieve it through the stories of who was I, before this horrible event. And that's maybe drastic, and not to say drastic. It can be on any level of shifting changes, because we do change. Life is a change. But the point is that we can then see the truth of it and refocus. So let's look at the Capricorn full moon that's happening, because of the events that are happening in the sky. Okay, today the sun is still at 0 degrees. Jupiter is still, as it's going from its 2 degrees plus of Pisces later tonight to go in its retrograde process until July 28th, when it actually will be back at 28 degrees of Aquarius until the end of the year, just a couple of days before New Year's Eve. So this is a time of compassion, Pisces coming back to us, which we need. We need that in order to be kind to ourselves, to retell our stories. But we've also talked about these themes of the parental. Cancer is mothering, nurturing. As many see it, Saturn is the rules and the structure and authorities that we look upon in the father realm. And in the ancients, they saw it more in the celestial energies, whereas now we personify these people that raised us and birthed us to being the total all, which has some questioning that factor. So right now, and I was going to say Mercury is going to go direct in a couple of days. So we'll have one nodal ruler, the south ruler, going retrograde, and the north ruler going direct. So let's talk about the full moon, which will be on the 24th of this month in June. And on the East Coast, it's going to be at 2:40.
Do you want to pull that up? Can you share?
Yeah, I can in a moment. Yeah, I will. Yep. So we can talk before we do it. Not everybody can see it. Yeah, go ahead with any thoughts. Lead on.
Well, it's the sun opposing the moon, the sun in Cancer, opposing the moon in Capricorn. So again, father, mother. So I feel like there's a push-pull there. There could be, again, I think it goes back to kind of questioning the structures that we have in our life. And because it's a full moon, it's about release. So it's about maybe releasing old structures or old ways of doing things that maybe aren't working anymore.
It is really a recap. You could say that's not a pun included. Capricorn, Yes, reframing our story, because it is like, what structures, Capricorn, what are we releasing? And I have it pulled up. In fact, as we can see, the personal planets of Venus, our attractions, our values, with our motivations of Mars, are applying to an exact conjunction next month, so that they're in the framework of kind of talking to each other on a wide basis to help us out, reframing that, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the moon, the sun moon also in these cardinal signs that really wants to push forward. It really supports moving ahead. And this is despite the fact that it doesn't have a lot of visibility to what Saturn is really doing, because it's kind of out of aspect. And it also plays into this whole Saturn Uranus square that we've been kind of covering already. So there's these thoughts or considerations on how we've reached our thresholds and how things, the system is unsustainable. There needs to be more capacity to handle more. And so there could be some disruptive type energies with this. However, it's nicely supported by Jupiter with a sextile, that moon, and a trine to the sun. So pushing forward, pushing past those preconceptions and power trips and control games that people can play, is going to help move us forward.
Well, I would certainly say that the old and the new, it's a new context, isn't it? The Saturn was representing the structure that's been, and Iran is trying to break up the system, as you pointed out. And that I think really bringing it to present moment too reminds me of this example of people wanting to stay home. It's like the old is, we haven't yet seen how this is going to play out, but we're opening up, what with COVID, as we've redefined that story, and we want people to return to work in order, but then it's a matter of, what about the kids, at home, and discretionary time. I think that's another big, huge part of this, is both Saturn and the moon represent time. Saturn is finite time, and the moon is processing time. Like, how can I process? I want to process more,
And speaking of time, it's like, do I want to spend an hour and a half to get to my job each way? That's 3 hours. I could be doing something else if I work at home.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, it's interesting also how there's all this discussion and legislation that's being presented around the relationship that women have with work, because more women were displaced or adversely affected by the COVID and are the slowest to return to work. And it could be because of that. The considerations of childcare, the cost of childcare, and the maternity leave considerations also for men. That it's interesting that's kind of also a theme that's been playing into new bills and considerations with government.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to stop sharing that. And we have a full moon too, a new moon. Let's go to the new moon. And, and when you guys can start talking. Please, let's keep it moving. I quickly, I'm a Gemini. I need feedback.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's keep it moving.
the new moon for Capricorn 6 months ago was on January 13th at 13 degrees Capricorn. And so we can look back 6 months ago at that new moon to the full moon of what were we thinking? Have we put some of those things into place? Are we making adjustments? Maybe the plan, it's like, no, I'm just going to put that off for a while. So I like to go back and look at the yearly, where we started, the phases.
The reference point is always good, especially when we're talking about timing, right?
Mhm.
We're talking about I really want to drive that home, because every month comes up with a new theme. And right now we're in that axis of lunar, which changes. It's a total processing time. Moon is always personal. Cancer is so personal. It's private. It's me. It's my timing, my flower that I'm birthing. And Capricorn is like the structure, the house that you built that says, this is it. The walls are there. The time is set. Time's up type thing. And so, yeah, that's definitely what I think you were just presenting again, is looking back on how to calculate our life now in measurement to things that may have happened before. So when were those, Liz? When was that again?
January 13th was the Capricorn new moon at 23 degrees of Capricorn. So it's really close to that 22 degree point.
It is. It's like another bell coming off that really is saying that we've come a long ways, opening up, and by opening up, then readjusting. Yep, that's true.
And then we are going into the new moon phase now in Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Cancer opens up so much in intuition, but there's also some sensitivity that occurs with Cancer. It's more, there's so much memory that's awakened and held within water and within our emotional bodies. So, checking in with our reactions, and if we're overreacting or picking up on actually other people's thoughts and truths versus our own.
And that is important again to remind that in this new birthing of this very fertile moment in Cancer is also still with a trine. Well, it's not really a trine, but Jupiter is still in Pisces, and Neptune is still in Pisces. So there's all this water emphasis, and the personal planets, and Jupiter is our philosophies, our visions, and Neptune is the greater forces other than ourselves. So that there's a lot of thought about that and philosophies, and again, because it's in retrograde, it's going to be self-directed. But the personal planets, I'm just noticing, are so close to each other. Look at Mars and Venus, 17 and 15 degrees of Leo. So that whole energy somehow, even though like in some ways maybe we're not totally clued into it, but yet the energies that we're feeling are going to be trying to work with how to be that full self of ours as we reflect back into that care and that sensitivity.
Yes, because Venus and Mars are moving closer and closer and closer, and they will be together on July 13th at 19 degrees Leo. And so to me, that's renewing and reevaluating our sacred union, and it can be with ourself and with other people. It's the masculine, the feminine, it's like kind of cool that right shortly after this new moon that's also taking place.
Yeah, and that's a cycle every 2 years to remember, folks. That, and in fact, Planet Buzz will be talking particularly about that. I think it's on the 18th of July. So people can clue into that particular talk to learn how that panel is going to really interrogate those ideas. Exactly.
I'll look
I think
forward to
that's
that.
really exciting. And I think it actually can give us a little goal, towards taking the time to think about what it is that we need for nurturing ourselves. What is it that makes us feel secure? What is it that makes us feel loved and part of a family unit? I think with Cancer energy. And then, we can use that July 13th date that Liz pointed out, when Venus and Mars come together, it's propelling our values into motion. So, yeah.
And go ahead. I was going to say, though, there's a lot of steam activity here, fire and water and air. There's not a lot of earth. I think that's something we talked about, because as we know, we're transiting into this air 200-year emphasis where we're shifting how we operate from of course, you have to be grounded. I'm not saying anything negative, please, about grounding or any earth sign for that matter, or if one is all earth, but all of us are remobilizing. And this is, in a sense, one of the indications of a lot of steam factor, you could say. Sorry.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I wanted to point out also that Venus and Mars that week of 4th of July is making a T-square to that Saturn and Uranus. So, and I always think of that Leo energy is kind of like the rebellious teenager. And, and both Uranus and Saturn are taking on issues of authority. Like, who's the boss here? Do I recognize your authority? And how we've been, it could bring up considerations, especially with all that Cancer energy tied into this as well. Like, where have we been abused by authority in our lives? And where are we not stepping into our authority, and where we've abused others with our authority. So I'd really like to emphasize the considerations of, not taking things personally. And I think this energy used, because there can be some pride and, wounded ego type stuff that could potentially come up with this, or just remembering or revisiting certain things. But,
well, if I may say, that's with Cancer, because we are during this archetypal period. That's how I measure time, when the sun is in its sign, because it's reflecting the light through that prism to everything. Cancer is a moment of personalization and processing. So yes, those are good words to remind us that yes, it's personal, but not personal, because I may add, the external component, the other person, it can be their story. They're just using whatever it is in connection with ourself. And that's where I think this whole business, I'm going to stop the sharing right now so we can get down to ourselves, where we can remember in this alliance of the whole spectrum of this, using all the water and using the air and the fire and the planets that are retrograde, to look at those stories of where we've been, because everything has changed and is changing continually. We're in this mutable time, and we've had the COVID. We could go on and on with all why the aspects. The nodal system is mutable. And so it's important to know how we're going to realign, because the external could have manipulated, or we could have misunderstood. I mean, there's a very personal, and then there's a cultural too, because these are cultural planets we're talking about. So it's not just us. We're part of a whole cell operation of a larger story. And so
I think
we
this
can
really,
realign.
yeah, I think this really, I mean, if it's used in a positive form, it really can emphasize outside the box creativity in creating solutions that are going to help us restructure what we need to in our lives.
By changing us inside, yes,
Yeah.
because if we, otherwise the world reflects what we are and what we don't see, and so it's really important. Next week, I want to add this before we end. We have several minutes now, so we're okay. But we have once a couple times or once a month guests that are not part of a panel, and so next month there'll be a group of 3 joining. One is Samuel F. Reynolds and Dr. Stormy Grace and Dr. Laura Tad. And we're going to be talking about mental integrity. It has a lot to align with some of the aspects and where it all goes. And now I think when I came up somewhat with this idea, it was before some of the June 19th and all the elements, but really looking at the whole United States as we're going forward with a Pluto return, which we know is one of the steamrollers that's very slowly, like the iceberg, or ice glacier, changing everything. Our stories of the United States is changing, and the stories of each of us will change, therefore. So it'll be exciting. Mm-hmm.
And I thought there was, did Catherine have a Sabian symbol that she wanted to share for this?
Thank you.
Yeah, so the Sabian symbol for the new moon in Cancer is the Union Jack flag flies from a new British warship. So, and that actually speaks to the need for protection, which is very Cancer, right? Mm-hmm. And control from those who may invade or attack. So it can be a show of strength.
Well, I think, didn't we all agree it really demonstrates still that consciousness of where's our new securities, right? Mm-hmm. Collectively, on a collective basis. Yeah. And what was the one for the new moon?
That was the new moon. Yeah. The one for
the full moon this week.
Right.
The full moon for this week is a group of people entering a canoe for a journey by water, which is, with Capricorn energy, we need to know how to paddle, right? Once we get into the canoe. So we need the rules about that so we're not whapping each other upside the head. But we need to work in unison with each other, so that we can get to where we want to go.
Good point.
So, yeah, which is the Cancer energy.
Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream.
Or you'll tip it over and you'll all be swimming in the water.
Gosh, right. I remember going down to Belize and Guatemala back in 2012, and there was a tour, and we all were on these inner tubes floating down the river. It was very programmed, but it was very nice. It was a good way to go.
Funny. Yeah, it's funny that they're both water oriented too, right?
Isn't it?
Yeah.
But it is the Cancer solstice world point moment of the directions. It's really how are we moving forward? We're moving forward now in a cardinal action way, but in an emotional way. So we're going to draw in our emotions. We're going to draw in our stories. We're going to realign ourselves. We're going to reframe and muddle through. No, and keep going.
And beef up our cybersecurity.
Yeah. And the Sabian symbol for the solstice, right? For that 0 degrees Cancer, which is actually 1 degree because you bump it up, is on a ship. The sailors, again, water, lowers an old flag and then they raise a new one.
Wow, that says it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good news. Well, this is the Cancer Moonbeam Team, and we come back every month. And go and subscribe to Talk Cosmos channel, YouTube channel. You can find that. We're programmed through KKNWs, which we are wonderfully aired through, and we love our station. And I also have Talk Cosmos YouTube channel, and there you will immediately connect with this. And therefore you can choose, oh, I want the Moonbeam Team, or oh, I want Planet Buzz, or whatever. And it would be wonderful to connect with all of you. We are so grateful to have an audience and look forward to hearing more from you. So I have Sarah Stromley from Redmond, astrologer therapist, and I have Catherine Metcalf, professional astrologer, East Moline, right outside of Chicago, Illinois, and Liz Mouchette from Camino Island, astrologer extraordinaire. Okay, Sue
Thank
Rose
you for
Minahan.
joining us on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests connect soul growth patterns with the energetic cycles of astrology. Be sure to tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic